Welcome everyone to another edition of Willow's Weather Briefing. Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. Today we have a continuation of the severe weather threat in the mid-Mississippi River Valley down towards the southeast and mid-south regions. Also, we have an associated flash flooding risk for some co-located regions as well. Above average temperatures for much of the southern United States along the Gulf Coast, especially areas like Texas and Florida. We also have below average temperatures for much of the northern United States, including the northern plains and the upper Midwest. A ridge is causing nice clear weather across the western United States. Here we have our surface cyclone here that caused our severe weather yesterday, and it's going to be our cause for our severe weather episode today. So here's our storm reports from yesterday. A lot of wind and wind reports succeeding a lot of hail reports, which is pretty classic, what you see in most severe weather events. Sporadic tornado reports all over the risk area. I believe this event sort of underreported their tornadoes because of how messy their storm mode was, but I'm pretty sure we had more than just one tornado here. So all in all, I believe the SPC did a decent job in forecasting the spatial coverage, especially with northern extent, might be unverified, but I think they did really well with the southern extent. So overall, decent job by the SPC today, especially with this wind risk over here in western Missouri into western Arkansas. Again, reports aren't perfect. They tend to be underreported for events that are very messy and in kind of awful terrain like in eastern Oklahoma and western Arkansas, so time will tell if this forecast really verified as it should have. Here's our drought monitor here. The solid lines demarcate the areas of greatest concern with droughts. Please pause the video if you want to look at that. Here's our current watches and warnings. Red flag warning for the northern tier of Minnesota. Some freeze warnings over here in the western United States associated with much below average temperatures. We also have flood warning or flood watch in places like Kentucky and southwestern West Virginia. But generally, fairly quiet right now. Our main concern is the severe weather threat that is going to come to fruition later today. Here's our forecast chart here. We can see our low pressure system here causing the showers and thunderstorms in these regions. We also have mostly high pressure across the western United States, some lingering fronts and boundaries associated with some meager low pressure systems, but overall pretty quiet around here across the western United States. Tomorrow, the low pressure will continue to move off to the east, causing some possible flash flooding in areas such as the Blue Ridge Mountains and into southwestern Pennsylvania. Oh, interesting. All right, well, I guess we're doing this now. All right, so this low pressure system will continue moving off to the east, causing some rainfall into much of the northeastern United States, and also high pressure pretty much dominates the central United States with some lingering boundaries around here that might cause some isolated rainfall. Here's our excessive rainfall forecast. We have a slight risk across the mid-south, across the Ohio River Valley as well. This is, of course, associated with their low-pressure system and the possibility of multiple rounds of trailing thunderstorms caused by a bunch of embedded shortwaves, giving the impetus for lift for some heavy convective cores that may train over the same areas and bring a flash flooding threat. Day 2, slight risk of the flooding threat I mentioned at the surface map over here, eastern Ohio, southwestern Pennsylvania into northern West Virginia. No flash flooding threat for day 3, Thursday. Day 4, Friday, we have a marginal risk across areas that generally surround the Joplin area, and a slight risk of excessive rainfall for the Ozarks once again, mainly due to a signal of another shortwave coming into the area causing some lift and thunderstorms by day 5, Saturday. Day 1 fire outlook elevated for the northern tier. No areas of fire weather for tomorrow, neither in the extended range. Here's our heat risk map. Again, above average temperatures for much of the Gulf Coast area, including southern Texas and Florida. Moving on, this heat will deplete starting midweek and transition off to the areas of the Southwest, which may see above average temperatures across Los Angeles into Phoenix, and Texas will once again feel the heat associated with an upcoming ridging pattern, which will bring above average temperatures for much of Texas once again going into this weekend. This heat will, of course, spread across the Gulf Coast, but generally, this heat wave is expected to be less significant than what we saw last week and into early this week. Taking some temps here, let's just look at San Antonio once again. High 90s. High 90s across this week, which is above average, and that will just continue off into next week. And the consistency of these high temperatures will cause an elevated heat risk. All right, so here is our main story for today, our convective outlook. Broad enhanced risk across the middle Mississippi River Valley to the lower valley and across the mid-south and southeast regions. Slight risk extends from areas such as central Illinois down towards northeastern Louisiana and then over towards the Appalachians. Our main threat today will probably be tornadoes. 10 hashed risk for... Okay. Really not doing good right now with these websites. All right, so enhanced risk over here. Main threat will be a 10 hashed risk of tornadoes within the southeast and into the mid-south. 45 hatched, or not 45 hatched, 45 regular risk for wind associated with the upscale growth and possibly a prolific quasi-linear convective system moving into these regions, northern Alabama into southern Kentucky. Also, a 30 hatched hail risk for initial discrete supercells that may form along the mid to southern Mississippi River Valley. Day 2 outlook marginal risk across the eastern seaboard from the mid-Atlantic up towards the eastern Virginia areas. And this risk is mainly for wind. Possibly a localized tornado risk as well. Day 3 severe weather outlook marginal risk across areas such as the Red River in northern Texas. I believe, just based on climatology, this is probably going to be mainly a hail threat because there is no really good surface response. So I believe this is mainly going to be possibly a hail and wind threat over here in this risk region. Predictability too low for the upcoming extended range for severe weather. Here is our day 3 through 7 hazards outlook. We have frost and freeze possible across the upper Midwest and upper Great Lakes, and flooding threat for most of, or all of Missouri and into the Central Plains and portions of the mid-Mississippi River Valley. We also have heavy rain possible and a flooding threat for portions of New England, such as Massachusetts. Other than that, starting to get a little bit quieter across the United States into this week. So let's go ahead and take a look at our paintballs here. So going into today, we have ongoing convection across the risk region that slowly depletes as you get through the day, but we do expect a reinvigoration of the convection possibly early on in the day around 1 p.m. across the mid-Mississippi River Valley, which may end up initially discrete, but will quickly grow upscale according to most models, and then move off to the east, which will of course modulate our hazards. The big hazards at the beginning will probably be hail and tornadoes, transitioning into a more damaging wind threat as things grow into a linear system down there. It seems like that transition will probably happen at around 5 p.m., maybe 6 p.m. All right, so looking at let's just look broadly Let's actually first look at our upper pattern here. Looking at our GFS model. We have an upper level trough here coming into the United States. There's also a localized severe weather threat for areas like Illinois, associated with that big area of synoptic ascent around the left exit region of this jet streak. So there might be a more localized severe weather threat there, near where I'm based at. But our main focus is going to be where that jet streak is really impinging on into the mid-Mississippi River Valley here. The jet streak really comes in and sort of just directly takes aim at this area, which will allow for possibly greater upscale growth more quickly. But in general, great synoptic support for this event. This trough will slowly deplete and become less amplified, and we'll possibly see some sort of reinvigoration of a shortwave here across the main flow for tomorrow's severe weather risk in the eastern seaboard. But generally, a ridge will start to build on the west, which will bring much above average temperatures for these areas down here in the southwest and into Texas. And that will generally just continue until we eventually get our next shortwave over here mid or late this week into this weekend, which might bring some unsettled weather back into the central plains. So something that I wanted to look at is our low-level jet response, our 925 winds. Typically our low-level jet response, we have a decent response across the mid-south at around Zersey, which should be sufficient to maintain any mesoscale convective system that happens to translate across those regions. Let's go ahead and look at our surface, our precipitation type throughout these regions. So precipitation associated with convection today, a low pressure system will move off to the east, and then some spotty convection, and there's little surface response, which is what I kind of hinted at during the hazards. I believe if there are going to be any risk for severe weather in the marginal risk region down here by Thursday, it will be primarily a hail and wind risk, simply because we don't have that big of a surface response here. And then into later this week, into the weekend, we do see the reinvigoration of a surface cyclone associated with that meager impingement of the flow across the Rockies, which will, of course, bring some unsettled weather back into the Central Plains, into the Ozarks. And that surface cyclone will eventually deplete as well. But by this point, evolution of our features becomes pretty uncertain. So look out for some unsettled weather in the central to southern plains from Thursday into Friday. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Let's just take a look at our temperature anomalies real quick. Much below average for areas such as the northern plains and the northeast into the Great Lakes. Above average temperatures for much of the south. Move forward. Again, still below average for much of the northern tier of the United States, and above average for much of the southern tier of the United States. Also below average for much of the northwestern United States. Down here, this trend kind of continues. A big warm-up ahead for areas of the western United States, especially the high plains region into the southern plains. And again, much below average for the northern tier of the U.S., especially the northeast. Could see temperatures 20 to 30 degrees below average up there. Continuing forward, this pattern sort of continues on, and those below average temperatures start to sag a bit southward towards the beginning of next week. And still much above average temperatures for the western United States. So let's go ahead and focus in on our severe weather threats here today. So let's go ahead and just take a general look at our precipitation here. Our surface low is beginning, according to this model run, it is currently probably around northern Missouri, less consolidated, but that will, of course, bring our initial round of precipitation into areas such as the Mid-South, and then reinvigoration of convection will begin at around early afternoon today, maybe around 1 to 2 p.m. in the mid-Mississippi River Valley up towards Illinois. And then that convection will just continue off to the east. ARRR actually does not show that much upscale growth, but I honestly don't know how much I believe that. Just considering our forcing mechanisms, our large synoptic support, and lack of any capping in the atmosphere is conducive for more upscale growth, or at the very least, lots of clustering, just like we saw yesterday. Let's go ahead and look at our moisture. So theta E is just moisture considering both temperature and dew point. So we see our boundary here across from northern Illinois down towards the mid-Mississippi River Valley over here, and plenty of moisture. We want to look at something like dew points. We have 70s dew points up across the mid-Mississippi River Valley, conducive for severe weather, and 60s dew points all the way up into central and northern Illinois. I believe this boundary is a cold front, if I'm not mistaken. Looks like it. Cold front situated across here, which is another reason why we kind of expect a more upscale growth, especially with northern extent, as we get these larger temperature gradients. Down here, it's more of a what we call a Pacific cold front, little temperature contrast, but usually you see a little bit less temperature values on the cool side of the front, on the dry side of the front. So maybe solar forcing regimes down here may be more conducive for discrete mode, but your general environments down here and supports is a bit less. So a little bit more conditional threat down here towards the lower Mississippi River Valley. Take a look at our mixed layer cape. Big cape values, good atmospheric recovery after this initial round of convection that we see right now. So shouldn't be too big of an issue, but again, it is sort of kind of a concern for initial convection, at least before we get upscale growth and storms can really start to sustain themselves. But decent cape values across the area, around 1 to 2,000 joules per kilogram of cape, which should be sufficient for severe weather. Higher cape values down here towards the lower Mississippi River Valley. Again, if storms remain discrete down here, this looks a pretty good area for at least a good hail threat. Our 0 to 6 kilometer bulk shear values here. We have pretty good bulk shear values, especially as that jet impinges and our main regime comes in here with a broad area of 50 to 60 knots of bulk shear, which should be sufficient for supercells. Our storm relative felicity, good for tornadoes, of course. Sort of meager throughout kind of the region, but again, will increase as we get that nocturnal low-level jet response as we saw with the 925 millibar winds. But decent in areas in the lower Mississippi River Valley up towards the mid-south and southeast over here. Pockets of 100 plus meters squared per second squared of SRH, which is pretty conducive for tornadoes, which is why we see that 10 hatched tornado risk up in this pocket over here. So I think that's all I wanted to look at in terms of the parameter fields. Let's go ahead and take some soundings. Let's just take a sounding, possibly first near the Boot Heel of Missouri. So a little bit of a wonky photograph could actually kind of favor left movers, which is more conducive for a hail threat, and because of this counterclockwise rotating low levels, but decent bulk shear in general. Low LFCs, LCLs. Again, because of the forcing in this area, I find it hard to believe that we won't see upscale growth pretty quickly. Good dew points, decent temperatures, decent low-level instability. Again, should see no problem seeing upscale growth. Mixed layer cape is about half the surface-based cape, so perhaps limited instability could hinder the upscale growth just a little bit, at least initially. But these low LFCs and LCLs kind of scream to me, as also with the cold front forcing regime, kind of tell me that we're probably going to see a linear storm mode. Let's actually take a look at the, before I forget, let's take a look at the our bulk shear orientation to our front here. So we're going to take a look at, that's my pen tool over there. Take a look at our bulk shear orientation with our front. Let's just move forward. So our front is kind of hard to determine. Let's actually use theta E for this. There we go. We can see it a bit more clearly here. All right. So moving towards 20Z, 21Z. Go ahead and take our pen here, draw our frontal regime, and then we will carefully move towards our bulk shear here, and then towards 21Z. So, I mean, fairly perpendicular to the front, at least with southern extent. So again, discrete storm mode, it might be more surefire down here, especially if we get higher LFCs, higher LCLs. But again, the further south you go, the more conditional the forcing actually gets, and the more unsure your initiation will be. So it's kind of a trade-off, but more perpendicular down here, more parallel up here. Could see more upscale growth up in these regions in the mid-Mississippi River Valley up here, less upscale growth down here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. So let's actually take a sounding in that region in the lower Mississippi River Valley. Maybe let's forward maybe 20Z. Take one near the Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana border, and pretty low LFCs, LCLs, but pretty decent curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, good bulk shear values, really good moisture, 75-degree dew point, 84/75, very good. Better low-level instability, so I'm starting to think that the southern regime of that 10 hatch could be the area of greatest or more focused concern for a hazard like tornadoes. Our SRH values are still decent, but yeah, I believe the southern Mississippi Valley is of greater concern, at least for when it comes to tornadoes. Now, even though convection is kind of spotty around here, I want to try to take a sounding ahead of these storms just to see the low-level jet response. Let's take one here in central Tennessee. And yeah, as you can see, better low-level curvature of the photographs. We do definitely get that low-level jet response. SRH is doubled in that amount of time. And thermodynamics, I mean, your Cape values are a bit less, but I do expect that they are underdoing the moisture a little bit. So we could see a bit higher Cape values. And also, the fact that the ARRR is kind of underdoing convection here doesn't really help either. Let's take some soundings on the NAM. So the NAM definitely shows, in my opinion, a more realistic evolution of the convection here. Let's take one around the similar areas. Take one around the Missouri Boot Heel region, around there. Still low LFCs, LCLs, definitely higher Cape values, and a little bit more conducive low-level curvature in the photographs, at least for our initial mode here. Not really that high SRH just yet, but very, very large low-level instability, which could just throw that out the window. If you have large enough 3 Cape, you can possibly get tornadoes no matter what. So your low-level curvature, you only just need a little bit as long as you have that low-level instability. Let's move a little bit forward towards initiation of our southern node down here. So once again, pretty darn good low-level instability values, sufficient curvature, and large instability values up here. LFCs and LCLs pretty low and right on top of each other, so very conducive profile for all hazards. Then finally, let's move on a bit more forward towards this upscale growth regime over here. And as you can see still elevated keep values, which is good enough for our linear mode, and sufficient curvature in the low levels should promote a balanced regime of a linear system going into the central regimes of the mid-south and then down towards central Alabama or north-central Alabama. So probably not going to discuss much about tomorrow's threat in the south, or in the mid-Atlantic, but I do want to go ahead and use the ensembles to just see what we have ahead. So let's go ahead and look at our mean sea level pressure, or let's take a look at our upper levels first. Our 500 millibar height means our trough migrates off to the east and then builds a ridge, and then a kind of seeing a little bit of a semblance of a troughing pattern here in the west by this weekend, so bringing more disturbed weather into the central US. And then the ensembles are really putting a ridging pattern by early next week, so we could see above average temperatures for much of the western United States by early next week. And then moving forward, that ridge just kind of continues to signal across the ensemble members, but do you see some semblance of a troughing returning sometime in mid next week, at least in the southern portion right here. But again, as we move forward, the ensembles kind of stop agreeing with each other. But I think this prolonged ridging will bring us quieter weather, at least comparatively, to early this week and late last week. So we should see quiet weather going into the middle of next week for sure. All right, our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. We have below average temperatures for much of the eastern United States, above average temperatures for much of the western United States, and also portions of the Gulf Coast, especially the southern regimes of Florida, the Florida Peninsula, and also regions of southern Texas. Our 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook. We have above average temperatures for much of the southern United States, also portions of the Northwest. That is going to be it for today. If you enjoyed this briefing, please leave a like and subscribe. If you have any constructive criticisms, please leave a comment down below. Tell me your feedback, and I will really appreciate it. So if you have any specific concerns regarding your area or want any specific information, please refer to your local broadcast or National Weather Service meteorologists. Thank you and have a great day.